All right, folks, we just started recording. We're going to go live on Facebook in a second so you can let other folks know. All right, welcome everyone, and happy ADA 32, 32nd anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. My name is Jessica Lammon, and I'm Executive Director of Senior and Disability Action, which is a community group that brings together seniors and people with disabilities in the San Francisco Bay Area. I also chair the Organizers Forum, which is a project of the National Disability Leadership Alliance, focused on supporting and expanding community organizers or community organizing in disability communities. So a visual description, I am a white woman in a power chair. You can kind of see my headrest. I lean a little bit to the side. I have short brown hair, and I'm in my living room with green walls and couch and some books. So before we go any further, a word on access. We want to honor collective access today, which means that we all share responsibility for creating a space that is as accessible and inclusive as possible. Also recognizing that sometimes there are conflicting access needs, and so we will work together to make the space as open as possible. So a couple ways that we will do that. We have Asl Interpreters who will be spotlighted the whole time. We have captioning, which hopefully showed up on your screen. If it did not, you can go down to the bottom or the corner of your screen where it'll say more, or you might have 3 dots and choose show subtitle. And I'm going to ask one of our tech people to put a note on that in the chat. So if someone is not hearing this, they can see in the chat how to start captioning. And if you find that distracting and you have it showing up, you can go to the same place and click on hide subtitle. What else? Speaking of tech, we have 2 people helping with tech today. We have Yessi Koopman, one of my coworkers at Senior and Disability Action, as well as Fiona Hinzi at Independent Living Resource Center. Fiona and Yessi, you may want to say hi in the chat, and then other people can feel free to chat to Fiona or Yessi if you need something, or let us know, with a wave or however works for you. As far as the chat, we ask people to use it minimally because we know it can be distracting for folks with screen readers. It also is sometimes a good way for folks to participate. So if you have a comment or a question that you're not comfortable sharing out loud, or a question that you want us to ask one of the speakers, you can put that in the chat and we will be sure to read that out. I do want to ask people not to do a lot of hellos on the chat. You can choose to do a private message on chat, but as far as minimizing it so it's not distracting. And then we have everyone muted until we open up for discussion so we can make sure to hear our speakers. Okay, so I think that covers our basic access guidelines for today. A quick overview of our agenda. So today is about honoring the anniversary of the ADA, also recognizing that we're not where we want to be and we have a lot of work left ahead of us. And so today we get to do a little bit of both celebrating and focusing on what's ahead. So we are very fortunate to have some amazing speakers with us. We are going to hear from Morenike Giwa Onaiwu about reproductive rights and the impact of the overturn of Roe v. Wade on disabled people. We are also going to hear from 2 folks from the Bay Area on disability pride and what that means to them. We'll hear from Marisol Ferrante, and we'll hear from Niddy J Stewart. And because we have some amazing people who have joined the call today, all of you are amazing people, we are going to have time for comments and questions for our speakers. And then we're going to do small groups to hear, what does disability pride mean to you? And what change in the last 32 years are you most proud of? And what major change do you want to see in the next 30 years? So, so keep those thoughts in mind, because we want to have a chance to share those with everyone. We'll come back to the large group, report back a little bit, and then we'll close by 5:30 Pacific time, I should say, an hour and a half. All right, so on that note, okay, I was checking in the chat. I assume that someone will remind me if I forgot anything. I'm going to ask Fiona Hinzi from Independent Living Resource Center, San Francisco, and also a member of CADA, along with Senior and Disability Action. CADA is the Community Alliance of Disability Advocates in San Francisco. So Fiona's going to say a few words about why we're here.
Thank you, Jessica. Good evening, everyone. So like Jessica said, my name is Fiona Hinzi. I'm from the Independent Living Center here in San Francisco. We are a disability advocacy and direct service organization. And before we get into hearing from our amazing group of speakers, we just wanted to sort of ground ourselves in why we're here and reflect on the progress we've made, but also how far we have to go. You know, for me, as someone who grew up in the kind of post-ADA worlds, so I've always existed in a world that has the ADA in it. But I've working in the Bay Area, that's really the home of the disability rights movement, with the 504 sit-ins and people who literally chain themselves to the Capitol, etc. We really can reflect on the remarkable disability rights history that we have in the Bay Area and that we have collectively in the community, and think about how far we've come. You know, it's thanks to the ADA that we have universal access to buildings, that a lot of us that are employed as people with disabilities have those jobs. That's all thanks to the ADA. That's all thanks to the ADA. And yet we have so far to go, both in our structural society. So even though we've come a long way with architectural and transit access, we still have so far to go in terms of the local governments and really society recognizing folks with disabilities as people who deserve to be recognized for our personhood. And, you know, I was saying to someone earlier today that when a panel that I was on earlier was that when we think about universal design, you know, closed captions that are in movies, or remote work, or curve cuts is a classic example. When we think of those as design features that benefit us all, rather than just the disability community, and rather than just folks going out of their way to serve the disability community and give us full access, but they're things that we all universally benefit from as society, that's when we know that, in my opinion, that's when we know that we've will have reached full inclusion and kind of a full melding as disabled people in our broader society, when we reach full acceptance. And we have a long way to go for that. So I encourage you all, as you listen to our amazing speakers today, that you reflect on the progress we've made, but also think about how far we have to go and the work that lies ahead for our communities. And we look forward to engaging with you both in small groups as you listen to these speakers. So I'll pass things back to Jessica, who will introduce our lineup of speakers.
Thank you so much, Fiona. So as Fiona was talking, it reminded me that there is a wonderful article that came out today by Sandy Ho, who is a longtime disability advocate, person of color, so many words to use to describe Sandy. And she now works for the Disability Inclusion Fund and wrote a piece about some of the issues that Fiona was talking about. So we'll be sure to share that article at the end of the call. And for everyone who registered for the call, we'll email out the links that come up. And so I'll share that. Okay, so it is my pleasure to introduce Morenike Giwa Onaiwu. Morenike uses she and they pronouns. They are an educator, writer, public speaker, parent, and global advocate, a proactive, resourceful, professional and disabled woman of color in a multicultural, neurodiverse, serodifferent family. Morenike, who is American-born to immigrant parents, has undergraduate and graduate degrees in international relations and education. She says she is passionate about human rights, justice, and inclusion, and works on equity, justice, and representation at Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, AWN. And if you want to learn more about Morenike, which you will after you hear them speak, their website is morenikego.com, and that's a link that we will share as well. And I actually learned of Morenike in a fabulous NPR article that came out about reproductive rights and disability and abortion rights in particular. So on that note, I will turn it over to Morenike.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm really grateful to celebrate the 32nd, wow, sounds just mind-boggling, anniversary of the Americans with Disability Act, or ADA. I am Marina Kay. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and they, them, theirs. I am a dark-skinned African-American non-binary woman. I am wearing a hot pink shirt color of this lip gloss, but it's popping. And I'm sitting on the floor in my living room. I come to you on behalf of my organization that I'm involved with, AWN, or Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network. I'm proud to be involved with them. AWN has been around for a little over 10 years, and we are a nonprofit organization that focuses on disability justice, gender and racial equality, neurodiversity, and trans liberation. And we were created because when 10 years ago, and sadly now, there was not a great deal of gender equity in the neurodiversity space in autism. Let me slow down a little, y'all. Thank you. That's the African in me. Let me slow down. So AWN, we provide community support, education, mutual aid, resources, and abortion from a recent plain language article that was written by some of our team. But I'm really here, just really feeling very pensive in a lot of ways, because I'm thinking about the fact that today is the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which a lot of our, of the giants whose shoulders we have been, prompted, we have been propelled on, had to literally crawl out of their wheelchairs and, and chain themselves to buildings just to get the rights that they deserved, that our peers who were non-disabled had. And so it's both triumphant and humbling when I think about that. And then I think about the fact that yesterday was my youngest child's birthday. And as I now have all of my children with double digits in the house, it makes me think about a lot of different things related to reproductive justice and Roe versus Wade, and just not only my life, but the life of people in my community, in our community, the disability community. I think back about things such as, Buck versus Buck versus Bill, and I think about the No Mas Bebe, and so many different programs that were government sanctioned, where people who were, people were sterilized against their will because of their disabilities and or their race. Often these things intersected. I think about today how there's still so many of our colleagues who are under guardianships as opposed to shared decision-making, and are not allowed to have autonomy over their own bodies in terms of whether or not they want to plan a family or have sex or not have, a family. I think about the fact that now in the state where I live, Texas, you literally cannot buy a Plan B pill anymore. And I think about the experience that I had a few years ago. I've had numerous experiences as a person who was assigned female at birth, and is disabled, in which there have been complications with my body in a number of ways. And my life has literally been saved by some of the procedures that are now outlawed in this country. And so I think a lot of times people ignore us, the disability community, when we're talking about reproductive justice. And I think that there's so many reasons. Some of it's ableism, not thinking that we can have children or want to or are capable of it. Some of it's infantilism, thinking we don't have sex, and some of us have a whole lot of sex. Some of us have none. It's a variety of things, but basically it all comes down to diminished autonomy. And when you are living a life and you're a person with disabilities, it's not as simple as a matter of, like, every person deserves the opportunity to choose and determine what you do or don't want to do with your own body and all of those things. It's also a matter of safety and health. There's no secret that statistically, we, people with disabilities, have a higher rate of being sexually assaulted, of being in relationships that are toxic or imbalanced, where we may not be able to negotiate family planning, where you might have, those of us who have, uteruses or what have you, might have irregular cycles. There are all those things. And then there's also on the flip side, people who want to deny us the ability to be parents, be that through adoption or foster care, or through being able to have children by telling us that we're not fit, we're not capable. We'll have a child that's disabled, as if that's the worst thing in the world to be disabled. And we have a higher likelihood of having our parental rights taken away, because there's more than 35 states and territories in the United States where disability is considered grounds for consideration of custody or not. In 10 of those states, that's in the absence of neglect or abuse, just the disability alone. And so I know this is sobering, and I'm grateful that we're going to have people who are going to share some more uplifting information here, but I'm needing to speak to you all, disabled people in my community, to tell you that these aren't normal times that we're living in. And I know you know that. And I know normal is just a drier setting. But what I'm saying is Roe versus Wade has been a legislative protection probably before the majority of us on this call were born, and it's gone. And if you think that those are things that cannot happen, if you to universal health care or the ADA, in which there are constantly being bills that are introduced to weaken it, or to any of these other things that are marriage equality and these other things that we rely upon as human beings, then you're thinking wrong. And so I encourage you, whoever you are, you've been touched and affected by this Roe versus Wade being overturned, whether you were assigned female at birth or not, whether you have 5 children or no children, whatever it is, it impacts you. because it impacts all of us. We are already disproportionately affected in terms of reproductive justice. And so I'm going to put two resources in the chat for you all to look at. And I encourage you, it's an article by AWN. And in that article, it's got a whole lot of different numbers that you can call or websites that you can visit with information about reproductive justice, about abortion rights. And, their Sister Song is in there, which is one of the oldest reproductive justice women of color led organizations in the world, and several others. If you are interested at all in working on any of these issues, AWN does have a policy team. We can be found online. Our website is awnnetwork.org. And we are usually AWN Network _ on social media. And so I really appreciate all of you being here. I'm also going to share an article, the one that Jessica was mentioning, that myself and several other disabled people were sharing some of our experiences and thoughts about Roe versus Wade. And so just want to give that to you for food for thought. But so this is a sobering moment, right? But it's all good. The fight, we still have that fight in us, y'all. If anybody can be creative and make things happen, it's disabled people. So I know together, we're a force to reckon with. And I thank you for allowing me to address you on the 32nd anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Thank you so much, Marina Kay. That was beautiful and powerful and insightful. And we're very fortunate to have heard from you today. And I really love that line, normal is just a drier setting. And I think you just reminded us of how important it is to remember some of the things that are really awful and how disabled people do not have autonomy in so many ways, particularly certain disabled people, right? More likely poor people, people of color, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. And that one of the biggest things we can do right now is talk to each other and be there for each other and talk about the issues. All right, and again, we will share the links that are in the chat out by email later to make sure everyone has access to those. So next, we are going to hear from Marisol Ferrante on disability pride. And Marisol uses she and her. She is a person who worked with students with disabilities in the San Francisco Unified School District, and then later became a person with a disability herself. And I've gotten to know her through disability activism in San Francisco. And Marisol now works as assistive technology educator at Independent Living Resource Center, San Francisco. Marisol won't be on camera today, but we'll go ahead and turn it over to her to speak.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for having me. I first started, my very first job was working in the San Francisco Unified School District with students that have disabilities. And one student in particular, she used to think that she couldn't do anything. So I would, take her out to the playground, and previously people would just read books to her while she sat in her wheelchair. And I thought, this is boring. So if I'm bored, she must be bored. So I put her on the play structure. And she goes, but I can't walk. And I said, so go out there. So she did. And she started, within a month, she was roaming the place and having a blast. And then when we went out in public, she was in a wheelchair and there wouldn't be a curb cut. So we would have to go all the way to the other side, back to where we came and cross the street to get back to where we were. So I called the city, the 211 number, and told them that we need curb cuts in different places where we needed them. And because of the ADA, within a month, curb cuts appeared where we needed them. And so this girl thought she could only be a secretary, and I told her, you could be whatever you want. So to make a long story short, oh, wait, before that, we would try to get on the Muni, and they wouldn't want to let us on. So I had to fight with the bus drivers and tell them, by law, according to ADA, you have to let us on the bus. So they did. And then we would get into fights with other passengers saying she should be at home, she shouldn't be out in public. And I would have to fight and say she has a right to be out wherever everybody else is. And so she ended up going to college, and she wrote a paper about how I instilled in her the fact that she is a regular citizen like everybody else, and she can do whatever she wants to do, and she has a right to be wherever she wants to be. And she gave me a copy of it, and when I read it, I cried. It was beautiful. And about 11 years ago, I had multiple aneurysms in my brain, and they gave me a procedure that caused me to have a stroke. And so I was paralyzed on the left side. I had to learn to talk, and I was in school to become a math teacher, and I lost all my ability to do math. I had just finished calculus 2. Well, anyway, I went to the Department of Rehab, and they helped me, to develop my skills. And when I was a client of Independent Living Resource Center, San Francisco. And so they told me that there was a job opening, and I still remember my skills from doing assistive technology. So I got hired to do that. And because of the ADA, they were able to help me to do all the stuff that I've accomplished since then. And I absolutely love my job. And that's all I can think of for now. So thank you guys for listening.
Thank you, Marisol. We're glad to have you. Recognizing that disability looks a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of experiences of ableism and pride, and we appreciate hearing from you. So next, we're going to hear from Niddy J Stewart about her experiences on disability pride. And let me bring her up. There you go. So Niddy is Partnerships Manager at Diversability, a community organization that elevates disability pride through community visibility and engaged allyship. And I've gotten to know Diversability through Tiffany Yu, who has done a lot of work around honoring the ADA and bringing up disability pride in San Francisco. The San Francisco City Hall will be lit up today, actually tonight. So thank you to Diversability. We're really glad to have another colleague from Diversability here. So Niddy J Stewart grew up in Nigeria and India and immigrated to the US for grad school. She worked in information technology for a few years before a neck injury and an underlying condition led to disabling chronic pain. And she is now a writer and a mother, in addition to her work in the disability advocacy space. And we can all read some of her fiction at onelittlestory.com. So thank you, Niddy. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Jessica. And thank you to the SDA Organizers Forum and the CADA. It's an honor to be here. And thank you to everyone who's here in community with us. I'm so glad to speak about disability pride, both from my experience as well as a member of Diversability. For identification, I am a South Asian American woman with wheatish color skin, shoulder length black hair. I'm wearing round black rimmed glasses, silver earrings, and you can't see it, but I have a shirt that reads "Disability is not a bad word." And I'm sitting in my office/bedroom, so there's a white background behind me. And I have a bit of a South Asian accent, so that might affect the transcription. To me, there's so many aspects to disability pride. There's identity, there's love, there's disability culture, there's part of disability history, there's justice and authenticity. And I think for me personally, as well as at Diversability, identity is such an important factor, because we feel like there are two disability origin stories. One, when we actually become disabled, whether it's at birth or whether it's acquired later on or manifests later on. And the other is when we accept our disability identity with pride and with ownership. And this step really, it took years for me, to be honest, because of shame that stemmed from my own internalized ableism, that stemmed from my cultural upbringing, that stemmed from the fact that I was an immigrant and my ability to stay in this country was tied to my ability to work. And it also, I think it also came because there was a lack of visibility and lack of representation of disabled folks. And for a long time, I struggled with that identity and I didn't know if I was disabled or not. And that's one of the reasons why I joined Diversability is, to have space where I can talk about my disability and hear from other community members and just kind of get that awareness and get that support on the various nuances of disability and what it means to be disabled. And really, I think for me, I went from feeling shame about my disability to actually feeling pride about my disability when I took ownership of my identity and of that disability narrative. And I feel like this is key also because society has kind of forced us into being closeted and to kind of keeping our identities hidden to some extent. And so I feel like when we share our stories, when we take ownership of that identity, we share our stories, that empowers us. And that kind of activates us. And so at Diversability, we feel like disability pride is a form of activism. And when we do this as a community, that pride is amplified because there's strength in numbers, there's strength in mutual aid, there's strength in support. Community. So to me, again, community is key to disability pride, and it's also one of the pillars for us here at Diversability. Another aspect of disability pride is diversity, because, and this is again, one of the things that, few years ago, I thought of disability as this binary, as this rigid binary. And I felt like I wasn't disabled enough. And I almost felt this imposter syndrome in calling myself disabled. But then, with more awareness and more conversations, within the community and on the internet, I realized that disability is diverse. It's a spectrum, it's a range. There are various types. It's fluid, it can be dynamic, and it's not always apparent. I think this awareness really helped me reclaim that pride. And I think this awareness is also what we at Diversability kind of aim to create, through our events or through our content, because there's just so many nuances to the disabled experience. And we also understand that like everyone's disabled experience is different, is unique to them. And that's part of the diversity of disability. And another important part of the diversity of disability, I think, is the intersectionality that exists within disability. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that intersectionality, in order to be really equitable. And so I'll say that, and that's why we call ourselves Diversability, not as like a euphemism for disability, which some folks think it is, but it's because disability is so diverse and because there's no diversity without disability. Finally, I think disability pride is about love and authenticity. For so long, I hated my body. I was at war with my body, and it was like a constant seesawing of pushing myself too much, and then my body rebels, and then I feel sad. And I think for me, a huge part of my disability pride was loving my body. And I don't want to say do, and advocating for myself with whatever access needs, with whatever, whatever access needs I needed. And I think the authenticity also comes from acknowledging that, there is love, but there's also some amount of grief for some folks. I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but for me, there was some amount of disability grief, transitioning from non-disabled to disabled. And that I still have space for that, along with the love for my body and for myself. And I think this kind of mosaic is what I'm proud of, because I can also be sad about, some of the inaccessible things around us, or the cultural or societal factors that don't really include us and don't really make us feel like we belong. But at the same time, I can also love my body. I can love the community that we have, and I can love and be proud of, how far we've come in our journey. I also want to say, I bring up love because, Cornel West said, justice is what love looks like in public. And so I believe that when we love ourselves and when we love other disabled folks, that paves the way for disability pride and justice and activism. Because when we love ourselves, we want to be visible. We want justice and inclusion and equity. And we want to take up space. And so that's what disability pride means to me. So I'll close by saying happy Disability Pride. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much to Niddy J Stewart. I really loved that. I think my favorite line that you said is disability pride is about love and authenticity. And that you talked about wanting to take up space, right? People that are not used to being heard and feeling like your voice is important to take up space. So thank you so much for that. So we're going to take a few minutes. I'm going to invite all of our speakers to come back up, Marisol and Marina Kay, and we can take a few questions from other participants, questions for any of our speakers today, and then we'll go into small groups after that. So if you have a question, please use the raise hand function on Zoom, or put a note in the chat. You can just put your name, or you can write your question either way. If you're on the phone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand.
And while we're getting the questions together, this is Marina Kay. I just really wanted to thank Marisol and Nidhi for their great presentation, as well as really just to thank the organization for hosting this. I think that it's just, it's an important event, and there's a lot happening in the world right now, but these types of spaces are so needed for our community. And I'm just really grateful to be able to share it with you all.
Right back at you. Yesy, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you both so much for sharing very beautiful story and very informative information. One of the questions I have is that, especially you both being from different culture, and what are some stigma, especially me being a person of color and you guys both being person of color, it's kind of difficult to empower yourself when you come from a culture of stigma and stereotype and disabilities being shamed as seen as some kind of taboo or sometimes a curse and stuff, at least from my own experience of different culture experience. I just want to maybe talk about what is some of the ways you guys overcome some cultural stigma, and to the point you guys are now so proud and just thriving in amazing ways. What are some things you guys would share with someone, especially a younger person with disability or other people, how to culture, how are you able to fight through the culture barriers and stigma, which you guys have, and it's great. But I would love to hear that. Thank you.
Sure. And Marisol is also a person of color too. So all three of us have that experience. And there's so much to share here. The first thing I'd say is it's kind of rough. I'm just going to be honest with you, because I love my people, but they can be a lot. The whole, put this on your head or drink this because it might cure you. Somebody looked at you or did this, and that's why. Who did we make mad? And who did somebody in their family make mad? And this is why this happened. Those types of things, or don't speak about it because then it'll make it happen. There's just, or the overwork and overdo everything, productivity to twice as hard to get twice as hard to get half or 4 times as much maybe. So there's a lot, and really sometimes. And this may sound patronizing, but I don't know how else to say it. But sometimes I really have to take the understanding of is that every culture, every society, every individual is at different places in their lives, and having the same expectations of my aunties and uncles, from Cabo Verde in Nigeria, that I have of someone who's spent their life in the United States and maybe well versed in disability are different. So there's a lot of patience, trying to educate in small ways, like correcting things that are being said, but doing so in a way that's respectful, taking, like micro lessons to learn, taking some time away, asserting oneself. Sometimes there's certain things that people are just not going to like, or, that you're doing or that you're saying, and they're, well, do you have to put that all over social media or whatever? Like it comes from a place of love, but it can also be very, very isolating. And so I think that one thing that helps is finding those people that understand and support, and especially who maybe have similar experiences, reading things from other people, kind of taking some time away and trying to, like cherish the beautiful and good things, about the culture, sometimes to mitigate some of the things that are problematic. And one last thing that I'd like to say is that I would also say, I think that without realizing it, despite the fact that on the surface, there is a great deal of ableism that's embedded in a lot of our cultures, I think there is also and kind of an unseen, unheard type of acceptance as well. Like there's certain things that are built into the culture, and are, like kind of like they're just, that are built into a lot of our cultures that are, inclusive of disability, even without intentionally being so. I think that there's certain things that we've, that already kind of make allotment. So I think if we think about like in terms of development and some of those things that are already different. And so trying to see it from a cross-cultural perspective helps me a lot. Patience, therapy. But I'll let my colleagues share as well.
For me, this is Marisol, by the way. For me, I was lucky that I just became disabled just 11 years ago, but my brother was born with cerebral palsy. And in Puerto Rican society, especially the males, my dad was kind of like dismissive of my brother because he wasn't what my dad imagined how his son should be. And so my mom had to fight for him, to get the services he needed and everything. And by the time I became disabled, it was different because I had fought for 17 years in the school district for all my students. So I didn't feel a sense of shame or anything negative. I just persevered. And in fact, I was kind of proud that I was, I've told my students, well, you guys can teach me now that I've taught you, because a lot of them remained friends with me. So I was lucky in that respect that I didn't have to suffer what my brother had to suffer because he was born with cerebral palsy.
I also to add what Marisol and Morenike said. I completely, I think, with I agree with what Morenike said about kind of standing your ground, but also patience and kind of understanding, like there are certain things that maybe will not change because it's just so steeped into, to the culture. Like there are certain, like even till today, my parents, they don't like it when I call myself disabled, but I'm like, I mean, fine, that's, that's not on me, that's on you. I am still going to call myself disabled. I think it definitely helped that, I'm here in the US, whereas my parents are in India. And, I feel fortunate to kind of, enjoy the, the benefits of the ADA and, curb cuts, and which do not exist, or exist to very small extents in India. Sometimes it's also, and I also want to, I also have to admit that, And I remember the last time I was in India, the roads are bumpy. It's horrible for my neck. I mean, I wear a neck collar, but to tell the taxi driver to go slow, I just said I'm pregnant, even when I wasn't. And, they were really careful. So kind of because they treat pregnant women like, like they're made of glass. So, yeah, it was just kind of, doing things like that. It definitely still hurts me to some extent that, so certain family members have not accepted that I'm disabled, but I stood my ground, and I was like, this is my narrative, this is my experience. And I think just being centered in that and being centered in community and just being my authentic self. I know that sounds cheesy, but actually, that's what kind of helped me stay grounded.
Thanks so much, everyone. This is Jessica. We have a comment or a question from Alex and then Angel. And actually, let me read the comment in the chat. Oh, that's Marina Kay. I'll just let Marina Kay say that out loud if you'd like.
Oh, it can be later. I wanted Alex to be able to ask the question.
Okay.
Yeah, can I go, or do I need to mute myself?
Go ahead, Alex, you're on. Thanks.
Okay. What I was gonna ask is, with the situation with Roe v. Wade, I kind of feel like a lot of things in this country are kind of a domino effect of what's about to happen with gay marriages and even in some cases the ADA, and I think they're even still peeling it back little by little, and most of us really have no idea, but they're doing it as in the dark, basically. So I'm asking, like, what does anybody have a good idea of how to combat that? And because I mean, I know we talk about voting, but it really doesn't matter on both sides. Our issues are never talked about whenever it comes to election season. Like, we're about to have the midterms and nothing is gonna be talked about in terms of, okay, how do we get the disability communities vote? And I feel like in some ways we're kind of helpless and at the mercy of the rest of the world. And I don't really know how to make things better. I want to try to do better, but I want to try to make a difference, but I really don't know how at times. All right, thank you. I'm done speaking.
I didn't know if either of you wanted to go first. But if not, I can go. So first, Alex, thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's something that a lot of people are thinking. They're like, what can I do? Like, this is crap. Like, okay, I want to vote. And we do know, unfortunately, that sometimes they, you know, the needs and interests of the disability community seem to be way on the back burner for a lot of politicians. And so what I would suggest is, so fortunately, there's some different things on social media that I've seen that have been really encouraging. And so what I've seen is that one place that I think that we have a powerful voice that we don't realize it is in all of these things as a lead up, like even what happened with Roe versus Wade. I hate to say it, but those of us in Texas saw it coming and we tried to fight, but we didn't see how the underhanded but brilliant way that they were going to do it. But we saw the steps toward. And so I think there's a lot of things that are happening that we can. You mentioned one of them, how they're constantly trying to weaken the ADA. This bill will be suggested about giving business owners this much time or this. And so one thing is that we found that if you write, call, email, text, tweet your the people who are supporting those bills or who are writing those bills, that helps a great deal. And when we send out the resources, there'll be a couple of links that I'll share with Jessica that she can send to you all about some of those, because there are a few that come out every now and again and nobody knows. There's so many bills everywhere. People can't keep up with all that stuff, but some of them are scary. And then sometimes there are promising ones, like I think a lot of us know that for years, the flying with a wheelchair has been kind of like a crapshoot in this country. And so now finally there's some proposed legislation to protect people, and to give, kind of like, and also to increase the rate of income for people who are, providing accessibility and assistance, wheelchair attendance and so forth in airports, and some other forms of transportation, some other transportation modernization. So there's some little things that are happening here and there, some things at the state level. But no one knows about it. No one goes to the public hearings. We're all living our lives. And so if there's a way in your city or your area, your county, to find what are the things that are going on. Is there a disability? Is there a local disability council? They usually have public comment. You can send something in, because I know we can't go to everything, but you can send in an email, you can send in a public comment, you can share your thoughts. Those things matter. People don't want their constituents unhappy. And so the fact your zip code is power. And so use that. I think that that's one thing we can definitely do and that we should do. And I wish if more had been, if that had been done here, it could have assisted with what became the avalanche toward the recent overturning. I'll mute so that the others can share any thoughts.
And if it's okay, we have a couple more questions. Niddy, Marisol, can I share another question? Okay, great. So Jennifer Walsh asks, how has the ADA made something easier in your lives? Maybe Niddy or Marisol want to start that?
I know that it made it easier for students, because the student that I was telling you about, they didn't want to let her into school because she had a severe cerebral palsy. They tried to keep her out of it. But since the ADA was passed, they got a disability rights attorney so that she could be able to go to school. And then they hired me to be her one-on-one paraprofessional to work with her so that she could be in school. And their law was that it had to be the least restrictive, possibility for her to be in school. So I just helped her when she needed help with certain things, but then she did everything by herself. And I encouraged her to do more. And so because of the ADA, she was able to go to school, or she would, if it hadn't have been for the ADA, she would not have been able to go to school.
Thank you, Marisol. Nidhi, do you want to share something?
Yeah, I haven't used it yet, but I know that if I do need to request an accommodation at work, there is some protection there. And this is probably a curb cut effect, an example of a curb cut effect, but there are some times when, and there was a time when my function was to the extent that I wasn't able to open a heavy door. So just having that wheelchair accessible door, that button, that helped me a lot. So even though it was meant for someone in a wheelchair, it really benefited me. So that was, that, and I, when I'm taking my son out in a stroller, like I benefit from the actual curb cuts like all the time. So which really helps me because I won't be able to like maneuver the stroller when there actually isn't a curb cut. I'm Nidhi and I'm done speaking.
Thank you. Morenike, I was going to let you share what you put in the chat.
Sure, and then I see that Angel had a question too, and so I was just going to share that a lot of our peers, and I still consider myself young, y'all, grown and sexy, but but not as young as some of you. But I feel like there's a lot of things I think that people just living their everyday lives now, you know what I mean, are saying and doing just your regular lives that for us are really inspiring, and it's really powerful to see, so it may not be, working for an organization, in disability policy or on a stage somewhere, but I think just the everyday life, doing your thing on social media and all this, to me, that gives me life, like seeing, people living, loving, being just as annoying as any other young person, who live with disabilities. So that visibility is something that there wasn't a whole lot of when I was growing up. And there was a question about, if a person becomes disabled later in life, how do we support them? It can be hard. I think that it was something that was shared earlier. I think Nidhi shared about the grieving process. And it's interesting because I think that I used to get really, really angry at parents who had disabled children who said, oh, I needed to grieve the idea of not having a child. And I was thinking, well, where'd you get the idea you were going to have a non-disabled child? I mean, there's no guarantees what your kid's going to be. So I didn't like the idea of grieving, because to me, grieving means you lost something that you wanted and you're sad. It's almost like I think about death. But then when someone talked to me about, well, grieving has cycles, there's anger, there's disbelief, there's this, but there's eventually acceptance. Some people need to kind of go through those emotions, that cycle of understanding and come to their new reality. And so some people have been, disabled, since very young. Some people acquire their disability later. And so I think it is different. There is, for some people, this internalized, we live in such an ableist society that it can be difficult for someone. It's okay with other people, but when it becomes you, for some people, it is hard. And I think that there's some really great resources out there. There's some, a growing number of memoirs about disability. There's some amazing disability like history, websites and resources. We'll share some things about disability justice. And there's so many people throughout history, impactful people who've been disabled, that it wasn't identified until later. So I think some of it, in terms of the practical, you kind of got to give them time sometimes. But and there are some people who will never come to terms with it. They're always going to, I hate to say it, but hate themselves. And that's a shame, because you're you, disabled or not. And so I think that really it comes to a sense of inner acceptance, but it's something you've got to do step by step, day by day, moment by moment, until it becomes more intrinsic to you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to add to that. One of you, I can't remember which one, said something about least restrictive environment. And this June, just a month ago, we celebrated the 23rd anniversary of the Olmstead decision from the US Supreme Court, which was actually based on the ADA. And it says that people with disabilities have the right to live in the least restrictive environment. And basically that's about living in the community, in a community setting, and not in a nursing home or another kind of institution. And the title of this call today included deinstitutionalization. And we had talked to some folks, I don't know why I'm saying we, I had talked to some folks who've done a lot of work in helping disabled people move out of institutions into the community. There's so much history there, and it has come up today from our speakers about how institutionalization conservatorship and lack of autonomy in a lot of ways are still happening and often being abused. And so just wanted to bring that in to acknowledge that. And we will likely set an organizers forum call on deinstitutionalization in the next couple of months. So stay tuned on that. But one specific thing leading to a question I have for our speakers is that in talking to folks at Laguna Honda Hospital, which is in San Francisco, and it's the biggest skilled nursing facility in the country, as far as we all know, had about 700 people. Now it's about 600 and some. And a lot of people of color, many people who were unhoused when they came in and don't have a home to go to, may not have family in the area. And I was talking to another coworker who's a Latina immigrant, who was saying that if you're not used to dreaming, then you don't realize what options you have. And you're not going to say, I don't want to live here, I want to live somewhere else. You're not going to think about what's possible. And so I really appreciate Angel's question about how do we support people. And so I want to ask, how do we also support disabled people, particularly multiply marginalized people, to have dreams? I like to ask the hard questions. Any thoughts from our speakers on that?
I wanted to let the others go because I feel like I've talked a lot. So, but I'll share afterward.
You know, it's I mean, I don't have the knowledge to answer the question, but just an anecdote. Like, I remember one of the very few trips I made was to Portland once a few years ago, and I just happened to be having lunch next to someone, and I started chatting, and I said, and she worked in social services, and I was like, why, there's so many homeless folks, and why, what's the city doing to help them? And she said, we can't make them come in, they have to come in of their own accord. And I think mental health is, it's the form, it is disabling, it can be disabling. Full disclosure, I went through depression and anxiety and PTSD myself, and even with support, there were some decisions I just was not able to make. So I don't know, it's a complex problem, but I feel I really, my heart goes out to like folks who are multiply marginalized and also living with a mental health condition, because because of that ability to make decisions, and they can't be coerced. So I don't know what the answer is, but it's hard.
Thank you.
Marisol, were you going to answer?
I really don't know what to say, but I had this client, he's 77 years old. He has, he's on the autism spectrum, and he's been homeless his whole adult life. And so when COVID started, they were getting homeless people into the hotels temporarily. So while he was in there, his walker that he uses broke, and he got our number from somewhere, and so he called, and with our CARES money, we were able to buy him a walker. And so he was so proud and happy that he had that walker, and it because he was depressed and he thought he was going to be ending up back on the streets. And so he ended up advocating for himself, and he did finally find a permanent place to move to, but where he pays, like, I think like 20% of his rent And then an organization called Brilliant Corners pays the rest to help him. And he doesn't know how to use technology. You know, he said he's too old to change, but, you know, he calls me once a week and checks in. And so they made arrangements for him that he can pay in cash. And then the landlord will just take the money down to the bank and deposit it himself. And so that's the only thing I could think of, you know, that the little thing of getting him a walker caused him to have a better outlook on life and try to improve his situation.
Wow, Marisol, I'm really glad you shared that, because that's really inspiring. And thinking, wow, this man is in his late 70s, he's autistic, he's homeless, all of these different things, and look at this, you know, how his life has been transformed. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. Like, it's very interesting to me that people push back against like disability accommodations. The majority of accommodations cost the employer nothing. You know, the average accommodation, if you average them all, the ones that cost nothing and the ones that cost something, it's less than $500. I mean, they spend more on air freshener, you know, than they do on what it would take for someone to be able to come in, whether it's virtually or physically, and work, and, you know, or to whatever it takes to be able to be in those environments. And I think that that's something that a lot of people don't understand. And COVID, I think, highlighted it some for other people, some of the things that a lot of us with disabilities already understood, that a lot of these systems were inaccessible in a lot of ways, not just because, oh, you might catch COVID, but because, you know, it would have been easier for a lot of reasons to have telemedicine, or to be able to go to court virtually, or all of these different things, to order things for delivery, to, you know, have different options to sign things. There's so many things that people have not understood. This thing about the high back chair, yes, there's so many people who have situations where they're in the, you know, where they're given the, you know, old school kind of wheelchair as opposed to a power chair, or they're not given the right type of equipment for bathing and personal care, or some of the restrictions that were lifted during COVID, where you could have you know, like an immediate family member serve as a caregiver and be reimbursed in some places where that had been, where that hadn't been allowed, and now that's being taken away. And I'm thinking, you pay direct support people very little, so people are, you know, there's a huge, you know, transition. People are always leaving the positions, and so why not have some continuity? I think there's just so many. It really comes down to, I think, being creative and thinking about what does things best for people. The curb cut effect that was mentioned was so key. I spent so much of my life so privileged as an ambulatory person that it wasn't until I had babies and I had a stroller that I realized how horribly most of the wheelchair ramps were upkept, cracks, and sometimes the elevators were around the corner, like where you felt like you were going to get stabbed by somebody and smelled like urine. And, you know, like, I realized how inaccessible it was and how I had just not paid attention because it didn't impact me. And so I think that there's a lot of things that I think there needs to be, one important thing is there needs to be a communication, regular communication with individuals who are institutionalized, be it in an independent living center, or an intermediate facility, or whatever it is, a group home, because they need to know that they have rights too. They need to know that they can tell somebody or ask someone. A lot of times the people that are around them, it might be beneficial for them to be uninformed. And so for people not to let them know about the choices that they do have and the rights that they do have. And so I think that knowing, you know, sometimes we can, you know, really just share that wealth and that knowledge with one another. You know, you don't know what the other person knows or doesn't know. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I said independent living center. Yes, I meant, they used to call them state schools, independent. I don't know. There's a name for them now that I need to find. Supported living center, maybe. Sorry, I need to find what they're called, but they used to be called the state schools, but now they're not. The institutions, you know, basically institutional care. And so, thank you.
Thank you so much for the comments. So we were going to go into small groups, but I think that everyone is really enjoying hearing from our speakers, from the feedback that I'm seeing. And I'm really glad that a lot of people are asking questions and making comments. Okay, I see one heart and nod. Does that sound good to folks? We'll just stay in the large group. All right. So let's shift gears a tiny bit though. We would love to hear from folks we haven't heard from yet, and more from folks that that we have. So the questions that we have are, what does disability pride mean to you? And then maybe we can ask some folks to share, what is one change in the last 32 years that you are most proud of? And people can also share in the chat. So I see Jennifer smiling, and because I know Jennifer, I can call on her. So Jennifer, you asked a question from our speakers, but what is one change that you're really proud of or excited about? I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Using a bus.
You mean?
No,
Using
using a bus.
using a bus, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Riding the bus.
Using a bus.
Using the bus.
So having accessible buses with
Yeah.
lifts and ramps. Thank you. Paco puts in the chat, riding the muni bus. What else? What's another change that people are really proud of? Oh, Alex, you have your hand up. Let me make it so people can unmute themselves. Okay, Alex, you can unmute yourself if that works.
For me, I would guess I would say it's ramps and parking spaces, because I've had the difficulties of days where I haven't been without those two things, and it was a real struggle, and I couldn't imagine dealing with it every day and having to have someone carry me or have someone hold me up while I walk. And I've gotten better at those things, but in terms of walking up and down the stairs, but it's not something I want to make a habit out of. And the one change I would probably want to see is to where we don't end up losing our benefits if we work somewhere. Like that would be my main thing that I would want to change, and just not losing our benefits, period. Because we're stuck like this for the rest of our lives, so we might as well have them. But you know, the law of the land doesn't see my way of thinking. So thank you for letting me speak. I'm done speaking. Sorry
Thank
for
you,
the background
Alex.
noise if there was any.
No need to apologize. And yeah, that's a great point about benefits, right? That people with disabilities can get benefits to survive, but that's also in the category of so much to fight for, to make sure that SSI is enough to live on and that we have affordable, accessible housing. Isabel, do you want to share out loud what you put in the chat? No, okay. So Isabel put in the chat, I think disability pride for me is being proud of not giving up all the things I imagined for myself because I became physically disabled. I can still do things. Thank you. Okay, Marina Kay, do you want to share what you put?
Sure. And then there were also a few comments from a few other people. Yessie shared, if my thing will work, sorry, that I think disability pride for me, I'm so sorry, my thing keeps moving when I don't want it to. I'm sorry. I'm not. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, he shared school accommodation. They love that. They would not survive school without the extra support. And then Paco had shared earlier about the minibus. And what I had basically shared in the chat was captioning. So growing up, you could put closed captioning on your television, if they had it, for certain shows, but you didn't have it for everything. And so when it became something that people were offering, it opened up my world, because I can't always understand what's happening around me or process it in time, but I can read it and get it. And that's how I learn. And so it has made communication so much easier for me to have captionings. It's such, I don't even know how I would handle a lot of the meetings and things that I have to do without captioning. It's life-changing.
Thank you. I'm glad you caught those comments that I missed. I'm really grateful for disability community. I feel like I learn so much from all of you. I'm grateful for being able to share with each other the exciting stuff, the joys, the challenges, talking about ableism, and understanding having a body or a mind that's not considered normal, and learning to take pride in that. I'm really grateful for all of that. Angel says to have some sort of health inspector for disability accommodations that changes the environment, like curb cuts or anything of the such, that makes not only a requirement to be fixed, but have it be a priority. Absolutely. And Fiona.
Alex, I saw you put your hand back up. Did you have another question or comment?
No,
All right.
I thought I put it down. I'm sorry.
Okay.
My apologies. Is it down?
It is. Thank you. Holly, did you have a comment? We'd love to hear from you.
Hey, sorry. I just wanted to agree about closed captioning. Like, I've had so many issues watching TV or just in general catching what people hear. I mean, what people say. So closed captioning has kind of included me in the conversation. Like I am not, I've had some hearing loss, but I haven't ever considered myself hearing impaired. But I mean, I never realized that closed captioning could just bring out more information than I was completely missing. So it's really helped me a lot. And I'm really glad that it's been kind of like everywhere. That's it. I'm done speaking.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Of course, Marisol, go ahead.
For me, closed captioning, because my brain doesn't interpret what I hear a lot of times, because I was watching TV and a commercial came on, so I turned away to do something until the commercial was finished. And I heard the guy say, if you have reptile dysfunction, you need to take this. And I'm like, what? And so then I turned around and looked at the TV, and I realized what he really said, it was a commercial for Viagra. So I mishear things a lot.
That's pretty awesome. It's also such a great example, and not the first that we've heard today, of how one, I was going to say accommodation, but kind of don't want to use that word. But, because accommodation makes it sound like we're doing it for one specific person, right? But one feature that is about access really ends up benefiting a lot of people. The whole idea of universal design, that if we make things work for disabled people, it's going to be better for everybody. And Jennifer put in the chat, my parents lived on a hill on the 6th line, And it was the last line that was made accessible. I couldn't wait until 1995, LOL. Yikes. So the second part of the question that we've gotten into a little bit is, what major change do you want to see in the next 32 years?
Automatic door openers for every building. When I go to Starbucks, the door always closes on me. It's a struggle to get in. And then people, if they see me, they come and open the door for me.
What else? Alex, go ahead.
Well, I kind of elaborated on it whenever I said what I was proud of. The main thing would be able to, for all of us to be able to get married if we want to, or to go to work and keep home benefits and don't have to worry about losing health care to maintain our independence. Because, yeah, I have health care and I could probably go to work right now, but the second that I go to work, I lose my health care and I'm not able to maintain my independence and what I have. Or now I probably still need more, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm done speaking.
Thank you. For people to be able to get married if they want to go to work if they want to without losing healthcare. I want to add to that for people to not have to work to be seen as important members of our society.
Absolutely.
Universal basic income.
Absolutely. Marina Kay, go ahead and share again.
Yes, and Marisol, yes, universal basic income, heck yes. And so Holly has shared better accommodations in workplaces, more accessibility, yes, the universal income. And so I just wanted to chime in that I completely agree with what Alex has shared about how it puts people in this no person's land. Oh, well, you can work, but if you make this, we're taking everything away from you. And then that's not enough to live off of. So, just kind of keep people in this perpetual cycle of needing services. You don't take something away because things are going well. It's kind of ridiculous. If my husband wears glasses because he can see with the glasses, I shouldn't say, oh, now you don't need them anymore. It's ridiculous. And so, but what I'd written in the chat is that, let me find it, sorry, everyone. Because I have memory impairment, I wrote more societal focus on interdependence and universal design. Research shows that it's beneficial for people with and without disabilities. So that's research in schools, like educational, in the workplace, with communication, healthcare, like all these multimodal things. For some of us, it's a necessity. For other people, it may be a quote unquote, additional option. But either way, having these different things helps us all. If you have a ramp, everybody can go where they need to go. People who are walking, people in chairs, people with strollers. If you have doors that open, it helps everybody out. Now you don't have to touch the doorknob and risk bacteria. Like all of these different things that if we make them for the most amount of users, I just really hope that our society starts to move toward that type of model instead of being so reactive and what Angel's saying about people with disabilities being able to have the freedom that everyone else has to be able to get married, not lose benefits, have a realistic standard of living, that as well. I'd also love to see people get a real wage, support for the important support care work that they do. That stuff is not easy. And what they get paid is an insult. It's ridiculous. And I think it's shameful. And so I'd also love, I'm sorry, I'm just talking like there's nobody else here. But I'm about to have to log off and deal with the kid. But I also would love to see if the UN, the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, I would love if the United States would become a signatory to that as well. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm so sorry I have to leave early.
Well, on behalf of everyone, I want to give a huge thanks to Morenike Giwa Onaiwu for being here and sharing your thoughts and experiences and insights with us. And I'm going to thank our other speakers in just a second, just so you know. I just want to add two major issues that haven't come up, or maybe they have and I've forgotten. COVID, right? One of my dreams is that we live in a world where when disabled people and older people, particularly Black and Latinx people, are dying, we don't say that it's okay to move to, you know, a new normal, that's a problem and we have to keep fighting. And I want to talk about abolition, right? Not just institutions that are designated for people with disabilities, but prisons, right, that are overwhelmingly filled with disabled people of color, and that's not okay. So let's make that change in the next 32 years. So unfortunately, we are wrapping up. I want to express huge thanks to Niddy J Stewart from Diversability and Marisol Ferrante from Independent Living Resource Center, San Francisco, and to our excellent ASL interpreters, Jessica and Sean, and our captioner, Fenella from 2020 Captioning. And also thank you to Fiona Hinzi for speaking and helping put this together, as well as Tiffany Yu for helping make this happen today. So before you all leave, I'm going to turn it over to Marisol and then Nidhi for the last word. Marisol, go ahead.
Thank you all for coming to listen, and I hope we can do this again in the future. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, too. It was my pleasure, too.
Thank you. Nidhi, you get the last word.
Yeah, just thank you so much for this conversation. And, you know, I hope to see just more, let's be more visible and more representation, especially for folks with mental health issues. I feel like we need to do more for them. And yeah, just thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Happy ADA 32. Take care and take action. See you later.
Happy 82, guys. 32.
Thank you. I really enjoyed